So welcome everyone to today's conversation on coaching and the future of work. My name is Angie Bynan. I am the Assistant Director of Enrollment for the University of Redlands School of Business at the Marin Campus. As I mentioned, Pamela Allen is assisting today in the chat box. So you can use the chat feature to type in any comments you may have or any questions. And then, as I mentioned, you'll have the opportunity to unmute yourself and ask questions directly of the panel. So I'd like to introduce our moderator, Christina Walker, who will introduce today's panelists. Dr. Christina Walker is a professor in our MS in Organizational Leadership. Before becoming a professor, she led in corporate, nonprofit, and entrepreneurial settings. She was recently selected as the 2020 Fetzer Institute Academy of Management Scholar. Currently, she and an African colleague are working on a book about globally inclusive organizations. She is uniquely qualified to lead this conversation today because she is also a leadership coach with Lawler Consulting Group. Welcome, Dr. Walker.
Thanks, Angie. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I've been looking forward to this conversation, and I'm a qualitative researcher, which means what I do for research is ask questions and hear people's stories. And so for me, this is so much fun because we're going to get to talk to Laura and Jill and John today about their experiences as coaches, and I'm going to hear from them. We all will, and then hopefully we'll get to hear from some of you that are participating in the meeting today as well. So let me introduce our distinguished panel. First, we have Laura Gates. She is the founder of the Gates Group LLC. She's been featured as one of the Culture Amp's top 20 coaches to learn from. She's a mentor and equity advisor to VC-backed startups, CEOs, and executive coaches for Silicon Valley's most successful companies. Her proprietary framework for guiding leadership teams to harness collective creativity and innovation has been featured in First Round Capital's First Round Review. So welcome to Laura. And then Jill, she's the founder of Science Plus Soul of Speaking. She has been an executive coach and speaker coach for over 20 years, both to leaders in some of the world's top organizations such as Panasonic, LinkedIn, the NFL, Players Association, Salesforce, Stanford Law School, Google, Twitter, Square, Art.com, and Lyft. And she's also head of speaking coach for the TEDx San Francisco. So welcome to Jill. We're glad to have her with us today. And then we also have John Montgomery. He is the founder of Lex Ultima. He's also an adjunct executive coach for the Center of Creative Leadership, and co-chair for the legal working group behind California's historical benefit corporation legislation. And he's an international advocate for the Benefit Corporation and has been a corporate lawyer since 1984. So welcome to John. For those of you that just joined, let me just quickly say sort of the schedule of what we're planning on doing. So I've got a couple of questions that I'll ask Laura, Jill, and John. They'll provide some thoughts on that. Then we'll probably open it up to take questions from you guys. So be thinking about some things that you might like to ask. When it's time for you to ask a question, Angie will call on you. You can either use a little raise your hand button, or we're small enough that you can probably actually just raise your hand. And you can ask any of the panelists a question that you might have, and then I'll probably close with a final question. We're thinking, well, we should be done about 12:45, so that's sort of the plan. All right, so let's get started with some questions. The first one, and any of you, Jill, Laura, John, can jump in with your thoughts. So I think all of us can acknowledge the last 4 or 5 months have been very disruptive for all of us, even in the fact that many of us are working from home right now. And so what has been the biggest shift around your own coaching practice in this season? Who wants to jump in and start? They're all kindly waiting for somebody else. All right, I'll call on somebody. Come on, Laura, help us out. What have been some of the biggest shifts in your coaching practice?
Well, for me personally, obviously, working from home has been a huge shift. I'm someone who was on a plane every other week, living out of a suitcase and driving up and down the highways and byways to go to see clients live. And so this shift to virtual has really impacted my business in actually giving me more time and energy, because I'm not over caffeinated trying to accommodate everyone's schedules and looking for parking. But I've also seen a shift. I just facilitated a team facilitation. We called it a home site for 2 days instead of an off site. And I was worried that we wouldn't have the same level of connection or communication, or that I wouldn't be able to read the room the same. But it was actually looking at everybody's little boxes on the screen gave me almost a more intimate connection in some ways, and it was just as powerful. So I've seen people's mind shift to being able to work more remotely and interact more remotely. We'll talk about this later, but that's also part of the challenges we're seeing, right? Is the disconnection people are feeling. So that's another thing that's emerging that we can get to in a later question.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. How about you, Jill or John?
I can speak up. The past 4 or 5 months have been really challenging for my clients in particular who hold big roles in large organizations. I personally have worked with a hybrid model since 2005, and I went to 90% virtual 2 years ago. So the big transition for me is just that my coworker is a 10-year-old in my house. But in terms of what I help my clients with, a couple of things. One is helping them as leaders understand the reality for the people they lead. So right within the first week of the shelter in place orders in Northern California, my clients were immediately worried about their KPIs and how am I going to do? And I had to say, time out. You are leading people who are in full on survival mode. And so you can't get them to the type of performance you want, and you may have to scrap whatever you thought you were going to be able to achieve, but you have to connect with them as a human first, because if you don't show up as a leader and someone who is purposeful and connected to their realities, if you can't do it during an emergency, they're never going to have the loyalty for you long term. So it's people first was my message.
Yeah, that's good. The compassion piece is really important in this season. Thank you. How about you, John?
Well, on a personal level, like Jill, most of my coaching practice was virtual anyway. I tell people that I've been sheltering in place for around 7 years. So the biggest shift for me was just I got to come fully out of the closet, and I had felt sheepish before, sitting at my desk with my personal knickknacks on my bulletin board behind me. And, that's one thing that's happened with this working from home, is that we're in each other's living rooms, bedrooms, kitchens, dining rooms, back patios, whatever, with kids running around, kids home from college. So we may have lost physical proximity, but we've gained an unimaginable level of intimacy, which has been marvelous, because the Zoomiverse has gotten rid of the work mask. We get to show up in our sweats and our t-shirts, bad hair, beards, whatever. It's been great. Clients, on the other hand, have had a really tough time, because home is suddenly the center of the universe, not the workplace. And my clients have been expected to get their normal workload done with kids being educated at home, with adult children back from college or internships or work, or just moving back in with mom and dad to save money. So it's been chaos, and people, we've had to really reorient to this new reality, and that's been the biggest adjustment.
Yeah, it certainly is a new reality, and I think we want to talk about that a little bit. So maybe I'll come back to that. I want to ask a question sort of following up to something that Jill said about purpose. So one of the things in the Redlands School of Business, for those of you that aren't familiar, and I think Angie can post this in the chat for us if you'd like to take a look at it, but we emphasize something called the Arc of Purposeful Leadership, the idea that purpose really should be impacting us from our own self-experience as leaders, leading our own lives and our own emotions and thoughts, as well as how we lead our teams, how we lead our organizations, and up into society, having a purpose for everything that we do that benefits the larger society. So that's something we emphasize in the School of Business. And so I'd love to hear maybe how your own personal or business purpose has guided your decisions in the last couple of months? How have you used that to center what you've had to determine as you sort of dealt with some of the things we've been dealing with?
I can speak to that because a big part of my purpose is helping my clients find their individual and team purpose. And what I'm noticing is that this is, first of all, I see a lot of people clinging to the shore of like, we just want to go back to normal and the way things were. And it's like, you know what, we're not going back, people. Like this isn't even the new normal yet. We are in this huge transformational time. And if you look at for example, the last economic downturn, that is when we had the birth of Uber and Airbnb and WeWork. So we're really in a time of innovation and creativity that often parallels a time of crisis. And so what I notice is that people are taking a long, hard look at where am I living? Who am I living with? What is the work that I am doing? I've had probably 5 clients in the last month sell their houses in California and move everywhere from DC to Austin to Europe. It's really giving people a chance to ask themselves hard questions about what is meaningful to me, what gives my life meaning and purpose, what is meaningful about my work. And of course, those of us who are in, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs that have those core needs met, who can actually start looking at what gives my life meaning, what gives my life purpose. Do I want to homeschool my children? Do I want to move closer to my aging parents? So I feel like this is pushing against people and confronting people in a way in the last 4.5 months that we have not had to be confronted, because things were, for a lot of people, they were operating in somewhat of a comfort zone. And so I feel like it's times like this that really drive us to think out and reflect about our purpose.
Yeah, John, I'd love a conversation we had maybe a week ago or so about this, seeing the significant kinds of change that have happened. Maybe you can even speak to that.
Well, my life work has evolved into trying to transform capitalism. We've got a global economic system that's dominated by corporations whose sole legitimate purpose by law or custom is to maximize stockholder welfare. And our entire global economic system is a matrix that aligns around the purpose of business being to maximize profit for shareholders. And this Redlands leadership program is trying to change that with the Arc of Purposeful Leadership, but that's just part of the puzzle. And my sense is the current pandemic and accompanying economic crisis provide an opportunity not only to innovate on a company level, like Laura alluded to, how in the last recession we got WeWork and other innovations. But I think this time invites systemic change at scale. So what kind of an economic system do we want to redesign? And I think there's a bigger invitation to create a purposeful civilization. So we not only have the Arc of Purposeful Leadership, but we've got a civilization whose purpose is to keep humanity within the limits of our biosphere and take better care of each other. So I think that's really what excites me about this time. It's a chance. I think it's an invitation for us to start behaving as one human family that has one shared planetary home. And now is the time to start taking better care of each other in our home.
Yeah, that's interesting that Laura kind of talked about the purpose from the individual experience, and you're sort of talking about it from the society experience, that all of those can be impacted right now. How about you, Jill? Any thoughts you want to add to the question?
Sure. The thoughts I would add is I have a background over 20 years in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So although I spend my days as a speaker coach for senior execs, I'm running everything through the filter as a Black woman, being a sounding board and thought partner who can say, yeah, I appreciate where you're coming from, and that's not the lived reality or experience for 40% of the population or 51% of the women that are in the workforce, et cetera. So when it comes to, I'm a systems thinker, and when I'm looking at things, I'm still running things through the filter of, yes, I want a transformation in society and within organizations and teams and individuals. But if we're not dealing with the same set of facts, we're going to build something that it's like what's happening with AI. Like we're building the bias right into AI because human beings have it. So when an organization has a room full of leaders, and I routinely am the first or only Black woman or woman in the room, we're not going to build something that is going to be truly inclusive and equitable. So a big piece of what I do with my clients when I'm prepping someone for a big global event or someone who's going to speak to their large organization, my job is to pressure test what they're saying and ask questions. It's not that I have all the answers, but they need to what I call dig deeper and challenge their own biases in order to create better work, work strategy and share words that are actually going to land and be more authentic and actionable.
I love how even your own purpose came out in that, right? How your own purpose is impacting what you do, and then how that impacts and ripples beyond to other organizations. That's great. How about I open it up to the community? What questions might you have? Feel free to raise your hand. Angie can call on you, or you can use the little hand raise feature in Zoom. I think I see, is that Victoria? Do you want to jump in with a question? You do have to unmute yourself. Go for it.
Okay. My question is actually for Jill. Jill, you mentioned that like one of the things you're doing is, helping people as leaders face the reality of the people that they lead, and, kind of connecting with them in a compassionate way. So what strategies would you use for getting, you to connect with that way with the people you lead, to really figuring out what their needs are?
So just for clarification, thanks for the question. Are you asking what the needs are for the people they lead or the leader I'm working with?
For the people they lead.
So it's all about getting good data, qualitative and quantitative data from their people. So this sounds a little harsh, but it's how I talk to my clients. With speaking in general for leaders, they don't get real feedback from people around them. People either kiss up, put up, or shut up. Like they won't really tell them what they think. And it also happens when they're taking into account other people's experiences at work. So what I will do with them is ask them to find a few trusted resources, some folks internally, and possibly some other consultants to get real-time feedback around how it's going. So, in organizations right now, not even people on the senior leadership team all have a nanny to help at home, or have, a lot of people they may be healthy right now, but they have family members who are not well or who are struggling with financial challenges. So I generally kind of customize it based on who the leader is and what type of organization. And we ask, what are we not seeing? What's happening in terms of resources for your team and the people that you lead? So it's been evolving because of everything that's been going on. But my job is to just have them pump the brakes a little bit and stop and consider what else could be going on for people.
Thank you, Jill. Thanks, Victoria. That was a great question. Somebody else? Go for it, Jamie.
Everyone, thanks for hosting this today. I've particularly wondering, how do you shift in your coaching into the future? So as where do we go from here type question? So much of the future is unknown. Like anyone who's tried to put 2 minutes into your vacation planning, it seems absolutely delusional. So as we're looking at businesses, personal life in the coaching side, that question of how are you going to move forward, or what do you is that still a good direction to go in, or how do you move people into the unknown, knowing it's uncomfortable and that it's unknown?
I can speak to that because this was a topic that comes up a lot in my leadership coaching. because the people that I'm coaching are executive leaders of corporations and everyone is looking up to them for answers. When do we go back to work? Can we move locations? Do we have, am I going to send my kids to school or not? And I think what you're really speaking to is learning to be okay with the discomfort of ambiguity and be okay with the discomfort of being in a chaotic time. And ironically, knowing what you do for a living in the mindfulness world and what John also does with his practices, really this combination of being open to the outcome of the future while staying connected to the present moment. And, I joke to people, I feel sorry for whoever did the $10,000 strategic plan for 2020 back in December, because that money has just been, thrown out the door. But at the same time, we can still hold on to our principles and our core values about the kinds of cultures we want to create, the kinds of leadership behaviors we want to model, and staying adaptable to what the future is going to bring. And I also think this is why I was talking earlier about this clinging to the past, letting go of that. And more of my clients, when they just say, I'm just going to be with the reality of what is instead of the suffering of what isn't, then they start feeling more creative and more innovative in general about what the possible futures can look like. And thinking, I have a client, for example, in New York. They're a startup. They had a WeWork office. They let that lease go. And now they're available to open and hire people all over the world, which before they had to hire people in New York or who were willing to live in New York. So it really opens the field of possibility when we stop clinging to some past way of living and really open ourselves up to this future possibility of work.
That's great. Thank you, Laura. Yes, Antonia.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm thinking about fear, because I think a lot of people in this time of uncertainty are exhibiting characteristics that might have never been present before. And a couple of you have talked about moving towards and working with community, and other people are saying that people are becoming more dissipated and kind of like, I'm going to take care of myself. And how are you dealing with these, I'm going to say, kind of unexpected character qualities that might be showing up with your coaching clients?
I'll just add a couple things real quick. One is really giving more time to your employees and listening to them, listening for signs of stress, especially younger people who are alone and isolated, who don't have family close by. Having resources, employee resources like therapy, coaching, giving people opportunities to talk to people, as well as just creating informal coffee chats. And, I have a client, she's done amazing things of bringing her group together and having informal conversations. Some of my clients are doing daily broadcasts to their team. So it's really more about listening and paying attention to the signs. Jill brought up, the anti-racism, systemic racism. That has created a lot of, resurgence of trauma for the African-American population. And just, again, having listening tours, being open and creating safe spaces for people to share what's going on with them. And also recognizing that it may not be safe and healthy for them to talk about things that might bring back trauma. So really better reading the tea leaves and paying attention to people's well-being is crucial at this time.
That's great. John, any thoughts from the larger society level on the question of fear?
Well, I think what's just as working from home has flipped our priorities around, our lives now center around home rather than the workplace, because we're home from Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, instead of going to the office. I think it's also flipped our relationship to change, because we humans generally are terrible at changing our behavior. We're biologically programmed to establish a territory, map it, and then stay safe within that territory. So we really have a hard time when things change, either changing our own behavior or external circumstances. And what this time has done for all of us is it's forced us to be more resilient and get comfortable with the discomfort of everything being in play. And that's actually, from a biological perspective, or in terms of natural systems, things are always in flux. And having things be disrupted and in a state of flux is actually normal. And our human propensity to try to nail everything down and secure everything and have things be stable and consistent kind of goes against the natural process. So I think from a future perspective, we've greatly increased our capacity, as Otto Scharmer would say, to lean into a disruptive future. Because think about it, we've all completely changed our behavior. It takes 30 to 60 days to create a new habit. And all of us have been sheltering in place in one form or another since March. So like it or not, we have completely rewired our brains. We've completely created a whole new set of habits, whether we're aware of it or not. And this gives me great hope that we can change our economic system quickly. Look how quickly we got used to this. So this time gives me great hope that we can bring change at scale much more quickly than I ever thought possible.
Thank you. Thanks. That's good. And that actually makes me maybe think of another question to ask for the whole panel. And that's sort of the idea that we have had to, all of you have mentioned sort of having to make some alterations to your practice in this season. We do expect that someday we won't all be sheltering in place. So when we sort of move forward, as we move forward into whatever's across the ocean that Laura keeps referencing, what are some of the things that maybe the altered practices or perspectives that you've gained now that you want to carry into the future of your coaching work? Like, what are the things as you look ahead are worth keeping, the skills and behaviors, like John said, that you've learned in this season?
Oh, I think it's, what comes to mind immediately is just the authenticity. I mean, I put a little bit of a mask on when I got on this call, because up until noon, I was wearing a short sleeve, shirt that has tropical fish all over it. So I got a little bit more formal for this call, but I really hope that we can not put our traditional masks back on when we go back to work, whatever that looks like when the pandemic is over. Because I think we've much more real with one another, and that's something that I don't want to lose, myself included. I feel much more comfortable having people, here in my home office, and getting more of a sense of who I am. So I hope we don't lose that authenticity.
That's good. That's good. Thank you. Laura, Jill, thoughts on the future?
Well, I've been calling this period the age of certain uncertainty. And it's a term I used years ago when I traveled around the world on my own in my 20s, and people would always ask, like, aren't you scared? Aren't you? And I would say, well, there's an element of certain uncertainty. I'm going to plan and be as flexible as I can and have a recovery plan if something goes wrong. But I know I'm going into scenarios that there's so many variables, I'm not going to be able to anticipate all of them. And so it's interesting that 25 years later, I'm using those same types of principles around certain uncertainty. They're accelerated and they're complex right now. But my work life is not too different. But from a coaching practice standpoint, I'm bringing back some of the practices I used years ago, making sure that my clients are using a checklist. It's basically truth, empathy, hope, vision, and accountability. And making sure that as they put their thoughts together and they're going to be speaking, et cetera, that they're using that checklist. Am I really showing up the way I need to be and having an authentic virtual persona, so that we're not always trying to pretend we're all right when things are not necessarily going okay, because that only hurts us in the long run.
I think everyone would love to hear those again. Can you
Oh,
say
yeah,
the
sure.
list again?
So the checklist is truth. So you have to address the realities of what's going on. One of the reasons why people were happy, even if they disagreed with his politics or strategy, people appreciated what Andrew Cuomo did with his address, because he would start with the truth. Like, give us what we're dealing with so we can move forward. So it's basically truth, empathy, or rational compassion. Truth, empathy, hope. People need to hear from a leader that this may be a mess, but we can do it. Or I believe, or I'm working on it, or I hope. And then vision and accountability. So that's my model. It's the dig deeper model that I use with my clients. When I used it for executive coaching years ago, and it's my model I use with my clients who are speaking. And if you hit those, you're much more likely to be able to land a message that is relevant to the audience, relatable, and repeatable. They'll share that message.
Thanks for letting me follow up, because I could see some faces trying to write it down. So I thought
Thank you.
How about you, Laura? Thoughts about what you want to take as you cross the ocean?
You know, the human connection really stands out for me as something that has really emerged from this time that I would not want myself or anyone else to lose. People having quality family time, people caring for others, people caring for strangers, companies giving back, companies reaching out. I would also say, regarding the hope part, I work with many Black, Indigenous people of color, and I would not want this to be a blip on the radar that we look back and say, oh yeah, there was that time that George Floyd was murdered and we all got energized but we're back to where we were. So I also feel like not only this global pandemic, but this spotlight on anti-racism and making fundamental systemic change, not only in the numbers of people we have, but in how our cities are divided and how our communities are built. I would really hope that we see systemic, enduring change from this time.
Amen to that. I think that is a definite hope of a lot of us. I want to just notice, so of our panelists today, Laura and John are both in our Masters of Science in Organizational Leadership. And I'd love to maybe even ask you about that choice of yours, because you've both been coaching and leading for a really long time. So why did you decide now to get a master's degree in organizational leadership, and sort of how has it impacted you? Because you started it right at the beginning of the season. And so what's sort of been the impact for you? Why did you choose it, and how have you seen it impacting your work today?
Well, I'll start with that one. So part of my challenge, I still am. I've been a corporate lawyer for 35 years. I practiced in Silicon Valley. I have a firm that still bears my name down there. And graduating from that identity has been really tough. And so part of this program is for me is just kind of an exclamation point on my career transition from graduating from being solely a corporate lawyer to being more of a change agent. And in a bucket, if a crab tries to leave the bucket, the crabs try to pull that crab back down into the bucket. And so I had to leave my old identity behind in order to emerge. And so this master's program is, I think it's part of my reemergence, and it kind of helps me draw a line between my old life and my new one.
So in some senses, it's really a part of your second career, or maybe even third career.
Yeah, it's definitely part of my second career. Yeah.
Nice.
And the purposeful the Arc of Purposeful Leadership, coincides nicely with my work on the benefit corporation and trying to upgrade capitalism from neoliberal economics into something that's more just, inclusive, and regenerative.
So it's more than just the organizational leadership part. It's also that the purposeful leadership and the Arc of Purposeful Leadership is really built into the program itself.
Yeah, exactly.
How about you, Laura?
Well, I've been looking at a variety of schools and programs for a very long time, thinking that I was going to go into more of an organizational development type program because I do work a lot with teams and I train leaders. But I've also looked at, I didn't need more coaching training. I'm already a PCC level. I'm qualified for the MCC level through ICF. So I was looking more for a well-rounded leadership program. And believe it or not, I found out about this on Facebook. I went to hear Tom talk about his purposeful leadership model. I brought my sister, who also signed up for the program. And the fact that it was based here in Northern California, and I thought we were all going to be a cohort on campus together, and I was going to go back to a college campus. I was super excited about that. We call ourselves the Corona cohort because we literally started right when I think we had our one class with you, Christina, and then it all shut down. So it's a little different. We signed up for a distance learning program entirely, but the benefit to me has been learning both as a coach. I work with HR, I work with leaders who have challenges in business that I have a much greater understanding. We're about halfway through the program. We've done the HR program, we've done the ethics program, we're working on the 21st century leadership skills. And it's really given me a much broader depth of understanding of what the leaders I work with face, the corporations that I work with face, and a side benefit is to help me really analyze and look at my business in a different way that I hadn't anticipated.
Thank you. Maybe one or two more questions from the group. You else have something? Has there been anything in the chat that we should be paying attention to? I haven't been watching that.
The chat's pretty clear. I think folks are engaged in listening. But I have a quick question for the students that are on the panel. What advice would you give a prospective student, someone that is either pivoting their careers and looking to, one, become a coach, and secondly, the workload amount, having a student cap on as well as a professional cap with the authentic self? Any one little, two little takeaways, advice from the panel?
I will say it's, you would think that signing up for a master's accelerated 14-month master's program, you would realize the work it would entail, but that has been more work than I anticipated. But I want to share that I sent a memo to a client last week, and someone told me, this is an epic memo, it will go down in history. And I 100% credit this learning for my ability to write an amazing memo with research to back it up and evidence to back it up and logic and facts with a clear argument. Christina, you would be very, very happy to hear me say that. I thought I was a good writer before, but this has made me a good researcher. And I'm someone who I learn through experience, and then I understand what I did. So I've been practicing this work for 25 plus years, but now I'm understanding the evidence-based research behind it. And I find that extremely invaluable.
How about you, John?
Well, one of the great things about this program is that, it's intense and it, there's sort of no rest for the weary. So if you don't have a for managing your life like David Allen's Getting Things Done, you'll be toast. But if you're well organized, it's a great program. I learned a ton about business as a corporate lawyer through osmosis, and like Laura was saying, it's really nice to get the formal business.
I think we've lost John for a second.
It's kind of like getting an MBA with, am I back?
Yes, you're back.
Okay. It's kind of like getting an executive MBA with, the program is kind of like getting an executive MBA with an emphasis on leadership. And so, I like the fact that it's intense and will be done in next April. And I think there are enough radicals in this program, like me, that are, going to be pushing the envelope with the Arc of Purposeful Leadership because the Arc of Purposeful Leadership, in my sense of the program so far, is that it's nested in the prevailing economic matrix, and we've got to change. Not only do we have to change our approach to leadership, but we've got to change the underlying matrix. And for me, it's really, really helpful to get the grounding in the conventional business school education that the people that run our global economic system have received. So I feel much more confident in approaching conversations with those in power because I now understand much more clearly how they have been trained and where their thinking about business comes from. So that's been extremely helpful.
Great. That's good. Well, I am cognizant of time. And so I want to, if we all can just appreciate our panel, Jill and Laura and John, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom today. Angie, is there anything else I need to make sure to mention? I think you're going to follow up, right, with anybody who...
Yes, anyone who RSVP to this event, I will, since this session is being recorded, I will forward you the recording. It should take a little bit of time for it to upload. So either by the end of the day or tomorrow, you'll receive this recording for reference. And if you have any questions regarding more information about the School of Business, then I'll also put in the chat and in the email my contact information where you can get more information about the School of Business and other events that we will be hosting. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Thank you, Laura, Jill, John, and all the participants.
And all the participants, yes.
Thank you so much for
Thank you so much.
Thank you all
Bye,
for coming.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.